We're in our brainstorming session, which means throw it up on the wall. Throw it up on the wall. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, okay, it fell out.
Welcome to the WorkOps Podcast. In every episode, we dig into one story, a process that went sideways, a system that just didn't work, and what someone actually did about it. It's packed with practical lessons that you'll want to bring straight back to your team. This podcast is brought to you by Kinfolk, the AI service desk built for HR. I'm your host, Jeet Mukherjee, and with that, let's dive in. Hey everyone, today I am joined by Jason Desentz, who's the CHRO at Toshiba America. Jason, very excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and before we kind of jump into the bones of this, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you choose HR?
Yeah, I have the privilege of giving this story a couple of times, not too often in the distant past here, but I actually kind of fell into HR is really the way I like to say it. Originally, I went to undergrad school to be a police officer, and I made the switch thinking, it's probably not for me. And at the time I was engaged and my wife was encouraging me not to, just from obviously safety reasons. But my mom's side of the family, I have police officers and always thought it was cool. And I wanted to be this really cool detective and figure things out and solve crimes. But that really fell through. And then I really was kind of a lost for a while. And then I tried law school, just thinking, let me stay with the law theme here. Went to law school for a short bit, didn't care for it, left that. And then I'm like, Fred, I am about to get married here in a couple of months. I'm 22 at the time. I have no career, no nothing. What do I do? And at that time, my sister worked at Ford Motor Company here in Detroit. And I said to her, are they hiring? And she said, well, yeah, actually, they're looking for trainers. Do you think you can teach? And I'm like, sure. I had no clue. I'd never done it, so luckily they took a chance on me and they taught me everything I needed to do. And then I became a trainer, all things, everything from computer-based training to like Microsoft products to DEI training, cultural training, and then training is owned by HR in tradition. And then I got into the L&D space and then I progressed and then I started my career off in L&D from an automotive perspective. I left at some point, went to Chrysler, and I spent most of my career in the autos and then worked my way into other companies. And then I did other jobs, of course. I spent a lot of time in the beginning in L&D, learning and development, and then I moved into HRIS. So I had kind of a tech bend to my background, which at one point I had another identity crisis. Do I stay with tech and go IT, or do I stick with HR? At that point, I had some great mentors who said, look, you're in HR. Maybe selfishly, they wanted to keep me too, probably, and I'm very grateful for that, of course. Still friends to this day and mentors, but I then jumped around and became a high potential. And I would rotate every 18 months. So I sat in a business partner chair or generalist at that time. We didn't have business partners. And then I moved into another COE when I went into compensation, organization planning. I was in OE, organizational development, organizational effectiveness. Then I got to manage groups in the space of field HR, supporting every other parts of the division of the business, and then worked my way up to the CHRO. And by the time I was 40 years old, I had the privilege of leading a publicly traded company globally as a chief human resource officer. And I've been kind of doing that for the last 10 years. And I've actually had a stint in consultancy as well. So I've had a chance not only to work at big companies, but I also worked at a lot of startups, which was really intriguing to me to see everything from the very beginning. And I mean, startup in a condo to all the way to publicly traded stock exchange. I've gotten to see these evolutions and also been part of the bigs where I learned a lot of my process development because they teach everybody in the automotive industry to be Lean Six Sigma. So a lot of the way I think of things is very methodical. I look for waste. I look for continuous improvement. So that's kind of my career at a very high level. And of course, along the way, though, I went back to school, by the way. I said, I need a master's. So do I get it? And at that time, it was just starting HR, really. And I'm like, I don't know. So I chose business because I thought if I'm going to be a good HR person, I need to know the business side so that I can speak their language. So I have an MBA, and then I went on and got my doctorate in business as well.
That's quite a trajectory, Jason, all the way from potentially joining the police force all the way to where you're now. And it's interesting you mentioned about the rotations. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. With AI these days, what we're seeing is that actually HR and tech are merging more. And it seems that some of those capabilities are coming in-house and we may not need to make that shift. I recently heard from someone that they're hiring an engineer in the HR team so that they can do more with AI internally.
Makes sense.
I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think we're going to shift to a place where there are going to be more generalists who will then be using AI and those functional expertise of, let's say, L&D and tech and business partnering Are those going to start to melt away perhaps? Or do you think they're going to go deeper because you're going to need that subject matter expertise?
Personally believe it's going to go deeper. In fact, Ford Motor Company made, I don't know if you've read an article just recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, just for back out. They had fired a couple of people months ago. We're going to make some engineers, we're going to do AI. Guess what? They hired them all back, or tried to, because they realized that, look, AI to me, this is my perspective, Jason's perspective. I believe it's more powerful than the internet ever was, but it's no different than when computers came into the workforce. Did it really change the job functions that much? Sure. You and I are talking on a computer right now, but we still have learning and development. That was always there before. You still had payroll. Now it's going to enhance the way we work, just like the internet and just like laptops and computers did. It's going to enhance it, which then will alter the services we provide. It'll be like, you don't hear anyone on a job description, do you have internet experience? Well, that sounds silly, right? Eventually we're going to say that about AI. Do you have AI experience? Like, duh, I use AI every day for everything. We're not there yet. We're talking about it as if it's like, we haven't done this before. So I try to encourage people to really go back to history and how did we get through society, things that changed our society for the good, the bad, the ugly, but so impactful. The Industrial Revolution changed society that way. Automobiles put the horse out of business. So all these major events or innovations have changed society, but the core value or roots of our society, of our inside systems is still intact. The way in which it looks or it operates, that's what changes in my opinion. But the heart of it is still there. I don't believe it's going to go away. Some things may get, and the reason why I say some things, I don't know, there could be some things that go away. And I think you got to think about what are some of those examples. Call centers would be maybe an example. And I'm not trying to call any of them out. You still need people on the call because there's dynamic, but you see them all the time now. You're talking to a bot more than you're talking to a human. That's been for a while now. They've had trees to go everywhere and they've already mapped this out. Now AI can do it faster. So this isn't a new thing. It's just an enhanced thing. So again, AI is enhancing what we are already doing, and it's going to change then and create new jobs that we can learn and be even better. So I'm more of a glass half full than half empty.
Love it. And I want to call out that this is completely unscripted. We didn't share any notes with each other before we spoke. So I'm really excited about where this conversation is going to go. I think we're going to go in some interesting places. I think we've already started there. It's starting to get pretty philosophical. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting what you said there around that it's initially people used to put like, I can work with email on the resumes, or like I can use
Word 95 and Word doc. I know how to use Word and Excel. Great. Who's going to put that on there anymore, right? No one does that. It's a given.
Yeah.
Becomes
exactly.
just normal.
Yeah. But there is a transition though, right? Like
of course.
We're seeing a lot of HR teams who are, to your point around L&D, like they are setting up programs around AI fluency in the same way that people set up how to train using emails or Word, they're setting up programs around AI fluency. And I wonder when that's going to become something that is just becomes inherent with the new folks coming into the business versus continuing to require L&D support. Because I know you've also spoken about like the generational differences and how do we account for those pieces.
I was going to give you an example of that. I remember there was a time when it used to be told to me, we were going to do this automated, we're going to do direct deposit. Mind blown, direct deposit, right? And we were like, oh, yeah. Jason, not everyone has a computer, man. Not everyone has all that automated stuff set up. We can't do that. So we were forced to still do two ways until finally that fizzled out. And then we had the one way, right? But we got there. Almost every company does direct deposit this day. You only do paper checks in emergencies. Obviously, we also have the payroll printer because that's still going to be needed. But it's just, we shifted. And eventually we got there, right? But it took time. I believe it'll happen faster here. And this is just me philosophically thinking about that, because what you're saying, you're taking a technological innovation already to a tech-savvy society to some degree, right? Or generation. Older generations like boomers, some use it, but very rarely. Some have embraced it. Some are like, you know what, I'm old enough now, I'm good. I've learned enough. We'll let that go with the other generation. And I think that trickles down generation by generation until you get to the current generation in the workforce, the newest one. So, and even myself, I'm embracing it, but I have to force myself to use it, where I think is some of the Gen Zs have been using it every day. And it's no brainer. 98% of it still, my term papers are helping me go through this, right? And I get it. And I would do the same thing too. But I think that generation, although you're seeing a little bit of a resentment right now, and you see the boos at colleges when they were graduating, AI
Yes.
because not because of its utilization, because they all used it. It's because their potential job market may have gone down because people have decided to get rid of that role, whatever it may be that they were going to go towards. Like coder. If you're a coder, that's going to be a tough role to be in, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're actually pretty optimistic about
I am.
the future talent because they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're going to be AI native. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because it seems like there is a slowdown in hiring and there is a slowdown in the number of roles. And there's all these discussions around like, we're only going to hire mid-level or senior because we need that subject matter expertise and they can then leverage AI to 10x themselves. But then what happens to junior talent? How do you square those two things that's happening right now?
I think there's dual pressure. I think what you're seeing is you've got maybe that senior leadership is being influenced by outside resources. And that could be anything from media, it could be from board of directors, it could be what have you. They're like, oh my gosh, this AI thing's huge. It's the buzzword. And everyone's like, oh, wait, we can cut SG&A and just bring in a robot? Again, not new, by the way, not new. Because this happened in the factories when all my dad could remember the boomers, they're going to bring all these robots in to replace all these humans like the Jetsons. I don't even know if you know what that cartoon is, but the fact is everything was on, it's going to be automated. Guess what? Didn't happen. But did some things are robots? Yes, of course. Or robot welders, of course. But what it created was these newer jobs to fix the machines now. And then you had to program the machine, right? So it actually almost was a one-to-one. So we did lose some, we did innovate, and we actually created new ones, which created new skill sets. And one might argue that's actually an upskilling in our society. We're less reliant on mundane tasks and actually be thinking at a completely different hierarchical level as our brains function. And maybe it takes us to a whole nother level of conscious. I don't know. I'm just thinking there's so much more. If you had extra time because you didn't have to do something, wouldn't that be great? But sometimes you have to, if I was a recruiter, you know how many resumes and your eyes start to get droopy when you're reading so many, but if AI could spit out the top 30 and then I could focus, I'd be so much better with my time.
I agree, but it's interesting because I think if you have free time, I don't think in our society we are set up to use that free time for leisure. I think we're just going to fill it with more work.
Yeah, being a workaholic is probably, I'm probably the worst person to talk to about this, but I did just take 2 PTO days and I'm still thinking about all this. Yes, I do think so. I just think but it could be fun work. It could be exciting
the shape of the
work.
role.
It could be more strategic work. It could be less, oh, your password is wrong. Let me go change that. Is that really rewarding work? Maybe it turns into rewarding work, even though it is something different. I don't disagree with that. I think we don't know how to relax either. I think that's an American thing mostly, although I think we can learn from our other folks overseas because they know how to take a holiday and we don't.
On full shutdown holiday mode right now as we're heading into August.
Yep.
How do you think about the role of the people team and the HR function? Because I think, if anything, we just talked about the shape of roles changing.
Yeah.
And it becomes so much more difficult to then be like, hey, this is the talent that we're going to need in a year, 6 months. But now the tasks are changing because some of those tasks are going to be done by AI. So doesn't it become way harder to scenario model, to plan the type of talent that you're going to need? How do you account for that?
What people are struggling with, I think, is they're thinking about doing everything all at once. I think you got to take a step back and say, what makes sense now and what can we start with? And the reason companies don't start is because they think about the whole big picture. Oh my gosh, if you start thinking that way, you'll never start. So you got to just pick something, try something, and see if it works or sticks, and then move on to the next. I think a lot of proof of concepts happening. So I think even what we're doing at Toshiba, we do a lot of proof of concepts. And a lot of that has to do with, we're not 100% sold, so to speak, because we just need to see how it's going to fit into our culture. And we know there's going to be a learning curve. So we also have to take that into account. So we can't just give up, do it 3 months. You almost have to, at a minimum, give it a year of anything you're kind of putting in place at this point, because you need a cycle, and maybe even 18 months so you can see if after that cycle, anything else kind of reverberates. So that's a way that, again, if you take it in bite-sized chunks, it's more manageable and you feel more confident to start and stay in this lane of trying AI versus getting so overwhelmed and going, I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want to be a part of it. Let somebody else worry about that. I'm so busy every day, rather than embracing it and saying, could it make what we do better, but could it also improve the business? What we do impacts the business in many different ways.
For a lot of I guess, competing tensions in what you just said, because you kind of got to make space for that experimentation to happen alongside the day job. And that space is got to kind of continue for a year to 18 months at minimum. And you're committing to that. And you also have to bring people along in the journey across the different generations within the business to different ways. So I'm curious to hear, what have you guys built? What are you guys experimenting with? And how did you get that over the line? Where are you with that currently?
I've been with Toshiba about 2 years now, and they had started kind of this like AI champion, so something like that, so to speak, about a year or two before I joined. And they were already thinking ahead. Toshiba's an innovative company. It's what we were birthed on. So 150 years last year was our celebration, and we're built on innovation. So we're naturally trying to be at the forefront. So they've already been thinking about that. Now we're at the level of, okay, let's take chunks, little bites, and see what we get. So that's the stage we're at. In the HR space, one of the things that we've done is create a space where we had an HR summit this past year with my team, and they all came in, flew into Houston, where our headquarters is at. And we had a breakout session where we created multiple groups, and we said, all right, we're going to play around. We're a Copilot shop. So we have already the capability to create agents. And we had a free lesson about what all different types of learning modules are and all the basics of AI, right? We did this before we went into the session. Then after and during the session, what we said is we want you to create an AI agent, give it a name. What's its purpose in HR? How is it going to help people? What's the resources you're going to need to teach it, give it so it can learn from and use as resources? And then create an image, a logo using AI also. What we did is after the summit, we gave them about 30 to 60 days. And then we held a Shark Tank kind of event where we had 7 different groups. And the groups came back and they basically had to get up in front of myself and a few of the HR leaders. And we did the Shark Tank thing. And so we had, for example, we had Payroll Princess that answered all your payroll needs. And it had references to all of our payroll documents. And so because they get a lot of questions in payroll about certain things, like when's the payday? Do I have a holiday? Do I get paid for this holiday if I'm an hourly worker? All of that can be done now by this agent. And they can just go on Microsoft Teams and link to it, and it's excellent. So they can use it. We had something called Tamer that did the same thing around attendance for our hourly workforce in the factories. It could help build out schedules. It could also check in on point system if we had that, but it could do all many things around attendance. And then we had another one, just to give you another example, around recruitment that was able to build interview guides for the job description and even take some of the notes if they were recorded from some of the phone screens and even create a better interview guide based on that, saying where maybe you should focus, giving it a few prompts. Again, and the images the teams came up with hilarious, just the way they had fun with it. But my point is we gave autonomous space to try something. And it wasn't much work. They still had their day job. They had to do some type of their regular work. So it's not like I gave them and they had to make sure stuff was done, but they had time and they had dedicated hours where they would, and we cross-pollinated from different parts of the team. We didn't, like for the Payroll Princess, we didn't have just payroll people. We had some field HR people, business partners. We had other COEs in learning and development. So we had other people. And I think the best way about that is it just gives you a different visual of what its application could be like and what others might perceive, how they look at it.
Yeah, I feel that's amazing, by the way. I feel like to build the right kind of AI systems, you need to be more of a systems thinker these days. And therefore, building something just with your own expertise is going to be a pretty narrow view. And therefore, bringing in the users of that agent is also going to be really important. So it's really great to hear that you did it that way. And then it was really also great to hear that you mentioned the word fun. In order to drive adoption, they've got to get to the aha moment. And a lot of times we see as the way to get to the aha moment is to be in a safe environment where it's okay to fail. And then you have fun with it. And did you see that flip in those teams where they were like, oh, wow, I can do this and look what I've built? And did that kind of trigger the desire to experiment more, build more agents, share more agents internally?
Yeah, actually, some of my team has even taken it even farther. Now they're using AI, not just from the exercise. They built their own little agents to do their things, go through my emails and do this. So I'm hearing all these new agents being created from my team members. Now that they've experimented, they're getting better and better at it. And that was the purpose. I'm not saying that those agents they built are actually going to go live on some cases. It was just an experimentation with proof of concept. Hey, we have these tools right now. I don't have to go out and buy them. Now, we need to there are better tools that enhance things. So we need to go get those as well, because we're not experts in building them either. So it's something you have to ask yourself: build, borrow, bot, right? And whether or not I'm going to go get a bot for it, or am I going to build it myself, or am I going to borrow it from somewhere else? That's where we have to then think about what is it we really want to do. Because so, for example, AI coaching. We're looking at a third-party vendor to bring in for AI coaching, because I'm not going to build that out in Copilot. And there are better tools out there that do a lot better than I can, that can integrate with all of our current tools. So with that, it means let's go buy that and get our own bot, which that does it for us.
Gotcha. And you said something interesting there around integration. What do you see as like the limits around this experimentation? Is integrations and data access one of them? Are there other pieces?
Yes, integration, it's like we just fixed this problem and now we're going back to it, meaning about 10, 15 years ago,
Sure.
if you were in HR as I was, you had an HRIS system that was your system of record. Now let's just use PeopleSoft as an example. It's called Oracle now because they bought it, but the original creators of PeopleSoft went off to create Workday. So whatever. So I was working in PeopleSoft, but we also had Adobe for our LMS systems, for our applicant tracking system. We actually had different systems for all those modules. Fast forward 10, 15 years, the HRIS systems have said, you know what, we need to be a one-stop shop. So they went out, either developed it themselves, their own L&D, LMS, or they went out and bought somebody, right? Or partnered with somebody. Say, oh, we're going to partner with Cornerstone. We're going to partner with Skillsoft. And then on the ATS side, they're going to be like, we're either going to enhance our own or same thing. We're going to build it out. So what you saw was an average of 8 systems in an HR world back in the day. You're down to 3. Now here comes AI asking us to undo all that and put all these things back on. When you're like, I got to build the API. I got to make sure SSO is in place. Because again, you don't want to have your user having 15 different passwords, because I don't remember all mine, and I don't have that many compared to the average. So I think we have to be careful we're not going back and creating the same problem we just got out of. So yes, API integration, SSO integration is so critical. And again, I think you and I have talked offline, but just to reiterate here, when I look at anything, there's 2 goalposts. I want to make sure anything I put in place has little to zero disruption to the business. Okay. The other goalpost is I want to improve employee experience. So if I'm going to add all these bots on, I have to ask myself those 2 questions. How much of a disruption is that going to create in the business, zero or little? And is it really going to enhance the employee experience?
Yeah, and I had a follow-up question to that is, your team are starting to experiment with these different agents, and you have one for payroll and you go one for time tracking. At what point does it become too many agents? Or how do you manage that governance?
I haven't yet, to be honest with you, because right now what you need to do is, if you think about this, we're in our brainstorming session, which means throw it up on the wall. Yeah. Throw it up on the wall. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, okay, it fell out. We're not at that point yet. Now we've had a couple of things where, that probably won't work. But right now we're just experimenting, and I think playing, as I like to call it, but with real application. It has to be practical, has to be simple. The worst thing any HR person can do is add another layer to another process. We have enough processes already we make people do. And I get nervous going, oh man, they got to fill what out now? Oh man, that's another page. It's true. The managers need to do stuff. They need to go sell. They need to make revenue. We got to make it simpler for them and more manageable. So as an HR professional, I'm constantly thinking about, remember, that's our first goalpost, little to zero disruption to the business.
Yeah. And I really like that you've couched what you're doing in a very specific phase, where this is the experimentation and brainstorming phase. And yes, to your point, things need to be practical, but we're not looking for this production ready thing that we're ready to ship out for people. AI is moving really fast, and expectations are also moving quite quickly, to our earlier discussion that, hey, this is a change like before, but the change is just accelerating. And this may be a tough question to answer, but is there a time when you think, okay, we now have to move from experimentation to production ready. Let's get serious about this thing that we built internally.
Yeah, you can't be in play phase forever, but you can be play phase for new things, always. That's the way I like to say it. But yes, I think at some point, I think within the next year and a half, like I already said, we're already looking at bringing in a vendor now for AI coaches. So I think we're already on that track where we're saying, okay, we're ready as a company to try a little bit further than just us creating it. Let's try a vendor now. And I think that's where, at least from an HR standpoint, I can't speak to my peers and what they're doing. And they're also looking at their own different types of vendors as well. But I've also engaged my C-suite peers. So I've had the chief legal officer, the CIO, and I are pretty tight right now on a lot of AI stuff happening in the Americas for Toshiba. In fact, we're having a really deep discussion right now on governance. Of course, I'm more out there, and of course, my legal guy is probably more conservative. We have a fun little banter back and forth in a good way. And then the CIO is all about cybersecurity. So it's an interesting dynamic, but it's really great because we're having these really great dialogues and actually going over real things and scenarios and asking each other, what if? Eventually, we will come up with something that suits us. But the reality of it is we're at least all in it to know that it's important. And we're all in it to know that we need to keep moving forward. What that looks like, who knows? Because you're seeing this stop, go in AI too. I was all gung ho, to be honest with you, with AI recruiting, and I'm still skeptical because there's a couple lawsuits out there. I'm not saying this stuff isn't resolved already. It puts a pause on, yes, it's going fast, but I think it's going to be more following than leading sometimes in AI and as a practical tool versus the internet. That was the I'll follow you phase as well. I don't feel like internet was everyone was jumping on. And then when the cloud came up, every IT person I know was like, nope, absolutely not. Your data's absolutely not. PI information will be stored. Guess what? Everything's in the cloud.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And what you mentioned, kind of the discussions that you're having, it's healthy tension that should exist, right? To make sure that we choose the right thing. And I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts around what triggered that thought of, okay, we should probably go and buy rather than build or bought it. Is the end goal, hey, we're going to end up with a checklist where we know we've tried these things, we've built internally, we've built up that knowledge, we know the gaps. Now let's go and fill those gaps because they're not in the capability. How do you make that decision?
I'll be honest. At first, I thought recruitment was it. And I was already shopping for looking at vendors, talking to vendors, looking at everything. And I had several meetings actually. But then when we did the event just this past year with my head of talent acquisition, said, actually, look what I've come up with. And I can create interview guides. I can all the conversations I have with all the candidates and actually build things out. I can say, give me the top 5 candidates of all the jobs that went over the last year that you think I should hire. It's just, we did some of that. So, and I originally jumped on the bandwagon, which I was going, to be honest with you, I probably would have been happy, but now I'm missing on the opportunity to create something internally and just play with it ourselves. So I do think it depends, is really to answer your question, but I did know AI coaching was something that I was deeply interested in, but I needed to understand the different programs and how they all work, and they're not all the same. Some have you creating scenarios that you think are ones people need to be coached on, and some just have thousands and thousands of data points that they've collected over the years with all these coaches that they use, and then it continuously learns still from you and all this stuff. I chose to actually abandon for right now, the AI coaching for recruitment in lieu of spending my money on potentially doing this proof of concept with AI coaching.
Interesting. We slightly touched, you mentioned the certain fears, and there's a term that you used before, FOBO. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, fear of being obsolete. I always mix it with FOMO because everyone's FOMO about AI. Oh my gosh, I'm missing out. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, but then the other side is the employees are like, yeah, no thanks. I don't want to lose my job. And it's a possibility, right? And then, like I said, some of these kids in college are booing because I actually know someone who I have a meeting with later this week, is a friend of mine, and his son basically lost his job due to AI. Now, I don't know what that is yet. It's a friend of mine I know through his organization, but he and I are talking later this week, and I'm curious to really find out. I'm curious how it happened, what they say. But again, like I just referenced the Ford Motor Company article where they recognize they made a mistake in hiring back. Some places are even getting rid of their AI and going back to people and just going, we didn't get the value out of it. It's like, I'm not throwing names out there, but I'll throw one because everyone knows it. But like Gartner's great if you need the resources, but at some point, I got enough resources to get going. Do I really need to spend the money and keep Gartner around? Or do I just rely on what I already know and just develop my folks moving forward and then bring them back when I need them? Same thing with AI. Could it be done the same way? I don't know.
Yeah, we're living in an interesting time. And I also wanted to kind of touch on your stories around Copilot that we touched on. And I think I saw somewhere that you'd mentioned that, hey, it's almost like buying a Ferrari but driving it in first gear. Because you've given people these tools, but then you haven't quite equipped them. Yeah, but it sounds like you guys have gotten over that now. You're building agents and people are experimenting. What did it take to do that?
So we have this application called Toshiba University, which is run on an LMS system. And through that, we recognized we needed to get people AI ready. What does that mean? That means we need to create a basic curriculum, like 4 or 5 classes. I don't know, they're like 20 minutes in length each one. Some are shorter, it depends. And then we're creating new ones along the way. But we held these master classes where people could go online and take these classes. In fact, we even hired outside training that could teach Microsoft Copilot, even get even deeper. But the reason we did that is we did that for all computer-based learners. So they have access to, and even the hourly can get online and do it. And we feel like you've got to give instruction. If you send your kids to driver's ed, you don't just throw them in the car and say, here are the keys, good luck. It's a huge tool, right? They could damage things. They could hurt themselves. They could cause a lot more harm to others in different ways. And you could spend more money fixing your problem that you just created. So why are we not thinking about the same thing with AI? Why are we not getting our teams ready for when it is time for them to get in? And by the way, when you give someone a car, you don't give them a sports car first. You give them a 4-cylinder, easy to go and easy to manage. You don't give them a car that has all these options to be more high-powered or et cetera, even a stick shift. That was what I was playing with. It's like when you give someone a Ferrari, can you imagine if you gave them a stick shift but never taught them how to drive a stick shift? It's comical. But anyways, that was my point, is you got to get people ready and give them instruction before they actually start using.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps, it feels like,
right,
with any technological change to make the most out of that technology.
It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. We look at this as so hard. It's not. There's so many Gordon, you can find many resources on YouTube and learn yourself. You don't have to wait for Toshiba University to come around and your company to create it on its own. I watch YouTube videos all the time and just quick little snippets. It doesn't have to be cookie.
I guess to make the most use of the tech that is around now, the AI,
it
feels like more so than anything, you need high agency, curiosity, a learning mindset. Like all those things have not changed in order to progress and to be a high performer, right? So like, I'm wondering kind of what are the key things that you think are like specifically different now? Yes, the change is happening faster, but it feels like the core skill set is the same. But is there something else that is now net new that we have to think about that wasn't there before?
Yes, we as a society have gone, and I didn't come up with this. I give this credit to a guy who works for me. He said it and I was like, oh, I love that I'm writing it down. I have a board on my wall that I write down phrases either I hear or I say, and I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. I got to remember that. He had this phrase once, and he's in whatever context, and I loved it. It was, we've gone as a society from curious to cautious. We are so afraid to take risks where once we were known for that, especially in the US. We were sending guys up into space, not sure if they're going to come back. That's brave. Yeah. That's bold. That's courageous. Now we got so concerned over, and I'm not trying to bash on Gen Z or any lower generation, because I have 2 Gen Z boys, 23 and 21, but we gave 12 place ribbons to everybody. Why? Because we didn't want them to feel left out or whatever this feeling side of things are, which is important. That became cautious, right? That's an example of being too cautious and letting people fail, or say, if you want to be second place, third place, second place, you got to try a little harder. I even heard at one point England was considering not playing because they didn't care about the bronze. I'm like, I get it. I don't know if you're a Talladega Night guy, but I remember Ricky Bobby's dad said, if you're not first, you're last. And I don't think that, but there's a part of us that misses the drive. And I do believe that is part of the problem, is people are so cautious. They're like, but you go. My wife always, and I always say this a lot, so she laughs, but she had this t-shirt, because I was talking about change. So I saw this t-shirt the other day. It said, I love change. You go first. That's the curious to cautious mentality, right? Yes. And I like to say, and there's another phrase I say to people, is like, how come we start off life as question marks, but end as periods? We get boxed in. So we need to figure out our way to just reset and try. The old adage is better to ask for forgiveness and permission, but you need to be able to put yourself out there. And yeah, there's going to be risk. You could fail. And if you're so afraid of failing, then you really have to ask yourself, and are you the right person to try this out? Didn't somebody else do it who has more confidence, at least in knowing that they'll be okay after they fail, if they do fail? They may win. We don't win at everything. But all of your people in life that have succeeded, ask them, did you always succeed from the beginning? Every single one is going to tell you how all their failures.
Totally. I love that. And I'm going to rewatch Talladega Nights again, because that's quite a film. It sounds like you've created a really great culture at Toshiba Americas, where people have that space to experiment, and it feels safe, and you can progress with that forward. And it feels like the only way to progress in this is to create that space first and foremost, and then equip them.
Always.
So Jason, before we wrap up, any kind of final thoughts that you want to leave someone with who's in the middle of process optimization. We talked about Six Sigma and those kind of pieces in this new world of AI.
Yeah, I would say find as many groups or people who are already in this space, thinking about the space, connect with people who are already working in this space, because you don't have to reinvent everything from scratch. My advice that I'm learning, which is why I spend a lot of time conversing with people, whether it's, oh, that's interesting. I'll even do it at the grocery store if I see somewhere and I see something interesting. It's silly, but I'm curious. Again, I got that curious mindset. Don't be afraid. Have a little bit more courage to ask questions more about it, and find mentors, go online, read, listen to podcasts, do whatever you can to educate yourself first and foremost to get over some of the fear. And I think a lot of the fear is just not knowing. That's it. I think once people get over that, it's like, again, people were afraid to get on the internet. Now look at us. It's everywhere all day, every day. And it's we're on our phones, man. So I am more optimistic we'll get through this as a society, and it'll be just about 5 years from now, we'll go back and laugh at these conversations.
Yeah, we'll do another podcast in 5 years' time, and hopefully many more in between that time, and we'll see.
There we go. There we go.
Courage and curiosity. That's what I'm taking away from this. Thank you, Jason. I love that. Thank you for joining us on the WorkOps Podcast. And to everyone listening, we will catch you on the next one.